I'm going to take you somewhere today that don't get talked about as much as it should. Most folks have heard of ADX, the federal supermax in Colorado we covered before. But the place I'm about to walk you through, this is where the whole idea came from. This is where America invented the modern way of burying people alive. It's called Pelican Bay. State prison, way up in the very top corner of California, near the Oregon border. Crescent City. The kind of remote, foggy, redwood forest part of the country where you ain't getting to easily, and you sure ain't getting away from easily either. They bulldozed 275 acres of forest to build it. Opened the doors in 1989. And what they built was something the United States hadn't really seen before. A whole new kind of prison. A prison designed not to hold people, but to erase them. They called it the SHU, the Security Housing Unit. Let me tell you what the SHU is. The SHU is a separate part of Pelican Bay where they put men in cells that ain't much bigger than a parking spot. 7.5 feet by 12 feet. Concrete. No windows. No view of the sky. Soundproofed, so you can't hear the other inmates. Walls that don't let in nothing. The lights stay on. The door is solid steel with a slot in it. You eat through the slot, you get your mail through the slot. That slot is your whole world. And you stay in that cell 22.5 to 24 hours a day. Every day. For years. Some men, for decades. Sound familiar? It should, 'cause this is the playbook ADX copied. Pelican Bay opened in 1989. ADX opened in 1994, 5 years later. And the federal supermax that we toured before, the parking spot cell, the soundproof walls, the food slot, the men buried alive in the desert, all of that was invented right here at Pelican Bay first. California showed the rest of the country how to do it, and the feds took notes. Now here's the part that makes Pelican Bay different. Different and, in some ways, worse. At ADX, you generally got sent there because of something you did. You attacked guards, you ran an attack on the country, you escaped from somewhere. Even if you don't agree with the punishment, there was at least an accusation of conduct that put you there. At Pelican Bay, in the SHU, for decades, men got sent there not for what they did, but for who they were said to associate with. They called it gang validation. If the prison decided you were affiliated with a gang, you went to the SHU. And it didn't take much. A tattoo, a book you was reading, a letter you wrote that used the wrong word in Spanish, a name somebody else mentioned in a confidential statement you wasn't allowed to see or challenge. That was it. That's all it took to disappear into a soundproof cell with no end date. There's a man named Todd Ashker. He'd been at Pelican Bay since the late 80s. The state decided he was affiliated with the Aryan Brotherhood, based on a tattoo and on confidential informants he never got to face. He went into the SHU. 29 years he was in there. 29 years in a windowless concrete box, by himself. And the only way out, the prison told him, was to parole, debrief, or die. Debrief means snitch. Give 'em names of gang members. And anybody who's done time knows what given names does to you in the system. Gets you killed. So most of the men in the SHU couldn't debrief even if they wanted to. They was stuck. They couldn't parole because their sentences was decades long. They couldn't debrief without signing their own death warrants. So that left option 3. Die. In the cell. After however many years it took. A study done by an attorneys group around 2011 found that of the men in the Pelican Bay SHU, 4 out of 5 had been in there at least 10 years. A third had been in there 20 years or more. And 1 in 5 had been in solitary at Pelican Bay for a quarter of a century. 25 years in a soundproof concrete box by themselves with no end date and no real way out. And then something happened that nobody expected. In 2011, the men in the SHU, across every racial line, every gang, every group that had been told for their whole lives that they was enemies, they organized. The Aryan Brotherhood guys, the Black Guerrilla Family guys, the Mexican Mafia, La Nuestra Familia, the exact gangs the prison said couldn't even be in the same room together without killing each other. They got together and decided to do something the American prison system had never seen before. They went on a hunger strike. Together. The first one was 6,600 prisoners across 13 California prisons refusing to eat. That was 2011. The second one was bigger. The third one, in July 2013, was the largest prison hunger strike in American history. Almost 30,000 inmates across the state of California refused to eat. Started in the Pelican Bay SHU, spread across the entire prison system. The men in there fought for 2 months without food. Some of them ended up hospitalized, some of them ended up worse than that. They wasn't asking for the moon. They was asking for an end date on solitary. They was asking to see the evidence against them. They was asking for some basic things to read and to look at. They got called terrorists for it. Editorials accusing them of holding the state hostage. The California governor at the time, Jerry Brown, ignored him for the longest time. The CDCR, that's the California Prison Agency, tried to play hardball. But here's the thing. When 30,000 people refuse to eat, eventually the country starts paying attention. And the country started asking questions about what was being done inside Pelican Bay in their name. In 2015, after a class action lawsuit and years of pressure, California settled, the Ashker Settlement. They agreed to end long-term indefinite solitary confinement at Pelican Bay and across the state. And within a year, the number of men in long-term solitary in California had dropped by 99%. 99. Most of those men, the ones who had been in soundproof concrete boxes for 10, 20, 25 years, they got moved into general population. Some of them walked out into a prison yard for the first time in decades and didn't know how to walk straight because they'd been pacing in a parking spot cell for so long. That sounds like a win. And in a real way, it was. The men inside organized, they suffered, and they won something the system had never been willing to give. That's history. That's something. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Pelican Bay is still open. The SHU is still there. The cells are still there. The rules are different now. There's supposed to be a maximum amount of time you can spend in there. You're supposed to be sent there for what you did, not who you was said to know. But the building exists. The soundproof boxes are still operational. And every time California decides to start filling them back up, and they have, just not at the same scale, there ain't no real wall between today and what happened before. The Supermax model that Pelican Bay invented in 1989, where you take a human and you put him alone in a sealed room for years and you call it security, that model is still all over this country. ADX runs it. State supermaxes from Texas to Connecticut run it. The federal government tries to send people to ADX as a weapon, like we talked about. The technology of burying people alive that California pioneered up there in the redwoods is now everywhere. That's why I wanted to bring you to Pelican Bay. Not because it's the bloodiest, not because it's got the most famous inmates, not because it's got the worst conditions today, but because it's the source. It's where the modern American practice of solitary confinement was invented and refined. It's where the United States learned how to disappear its citizens in plain sight. And it's where eventually those citizens fought back hard enough to make the rest of the country see what was being done. I keep thinking about that 25-year statistic. 1 out of every 5 men in the Pelican Bay SHU had been alone in a soundproof concrete box for a quarter of a century. Think about that. Think about what was happening in your life 25 years ago. Think about everything that's happened since. Now picture spending all of that, every minute of it, in a room the size of a parking space, by yourself, with no end date in sight. And then ask yourself if there's a crime in this country that a punishment like that fits. I don't think there is. And the men in Pelican Bay, the ones who organized across every line that was supposed to keep them apart, they decided there wasn't either. And they made the state listen. That's all I got. Be safe out there. And remember, the worst things this country has done to people, it didn't do them loud. It did them quiet, in concrete boxes, in remote places nobody was supposed to be looking at.